So recently in Daf Yomi we're learning about Kli Cheres, the earthenware vessel. The Mishnah taught us that Kli Cheres is different from other Kalim in regards to the laws of Tumah. It is that, first of all, how can an earthenware vessel become Tameh? The answer is specifically through its avir, through the interior airspace. So for example, you take a dead sheretz, a source of Tumah, and suspend it inside of the Kli Cheres. That's what will make it tameh. It doesn't have to touch it, even just by being in the inner airspace. That's what makes it tameh. If the source of tumah does touch the outside of the, it will not become tameh. By other kalim, it's the opposite. The tumah specifically goes through direct contact, and the same goes for the halacha of how the kli can be mitame, how it can convey tumah to other things like food. The halacha is the same. Once the kli cheres is tameh, how does it make food tameh? If that food is inside the inner space, even if not touching, but in the inner space of the kli cheres, which again is not true by other kalim. The Gemara makes a drasha from the pasuk that discusses kli cheres, from the word tocho. It says its interior, that's where the tumah happens. The Gemara darshans from the word tocho that tocho velo tocho, but not if it's inside the inside. Meaning that, let's say we took a second vessel and put that inside of the kli cheres, and the outer kli cheres is tameh, and we put another one inside, and inside the inside one we put some food. The Torah teaches that that food does not become tameh. Why? Because it's not really inside the tameh kli cheres. It's inside of its inside, and so there's no tumah in this case. The Gemara adds the words that, and this is true even if the inner vessel is not made of earthenware, if it's a kli shetef, meaning that it's of the material that we're able to purify it in a mikvah. Even in that case, the food inside of that does not become tameh. So the question in this video is, what exactly the Gemara means by those words? So of course we look at Rashi, who says that this is the Gemara's point. The Gemara is saying that if the halacha were that the inside vessel, let's not worry about the food yet, let's just talk about the vessel itself. The vessel that we put inside the kli cheres, hey, one second, maybe that should become tameh. If that were true, the Rashi says then actually the Gemara's halacha would not apply. The halacha would be that the food inside of the inner vessel would be tameh. The reason is because a vessel that's tameh cannot function as a barrier from tumah. It can't block the tumah, which is what's happening here. It wouldn't be able to block if it itself were tameh. So that's the Gemara's point here, which is that obviously if we put an earthenware vessel inside of this earthenware vessel, the earthenware vessel would not become tameh, because why would it? Because as we mentioned, to make an earthenware vessel tameh, you have to put the tumah inside of it. So that obviously doesn't happen. So clearly we could understand the idea that in that case, the inner earthenware vessel blocks, makes like its own jurisdiction around the food, and so it doesn't become tameh. But if we're talking about a kli that you could put in the mikvah, like a metal, let's say kli, and if that became tameh, then one second, the food inside of that should become tameh. The Gemara is saying that no, that's not the halacha. Why isn't that the halacha? Because the truth is, the Psachim darshans that there's actually no such thing as a vessel making another vessel tameh. The vessel could make food tameh, but not another vessel. So in the end, the same halacha applies. Even if it's a metal, whatever material the inner vessel is, the food inside of that will not become tameh. That's what Rashi says. Now, Tosfos has a number of issues with Rashi's interpretation. We're going to focus on the last point that Tosfos mentions, which is that Tosfos brings the Gemara in Zvachim, which also brings the same exact teaching of our Gemara. The Gemara there uses this halacha in the following way. The Gemara there is discussing a principle called lav mina machriv or lo machriv. It means the case there is we're talking about a carbon, and the question is that we know you have to have the right intention by a carbon. If you have like a bad intention, it could ruin it. But then you could also have something where it's just an irrelevant intention. So the Gemara there is saying that Rava there is saying a theory that if the person has in mind like a totally different carbon, like for someone else's other category of carbon, then that's irrelevant because it's lav mina. It's not the same type. Let's say we're dealing with chatis, and he thinks of ola or someone else's ola, so it's a totally different type, and so it's irrelevant. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't affect the halacha here. The Gemara has a question on Rava from the halacha we're discussing of a kli cheres, that the Torah says that even if the inner vessel is of a different type, it is relevant. It does affect the halacha. It stops the tumah that's happening in the outer vessel, and it doesn't come in to make the food tameh. So it seems that this halacha refutes Rava's theory. The Gemara says no. This is a case where the Torah is teaching an exception to the rule. This is an exception. Normally, there is an idea that if he has a mind that we're talking about chatis, and he says, for someone else's olam, really that kind of thing is irrelevant. The Torah here specifically teaches that even though the inner kli is made of a different material, it's still relevant, it still has an impact on the halacha, and it stops that tumah. So Tosfos says, look, you see that the real point of this whole teaching has nothing to do with what Rashi says. It's not a discussion about, well, maybe if it's made of metal, it should become tameh, and so it shouldn't stop the tumah. Nothing to do with that. We see that the whole discussion here is this idea of lav mina. The whole point is that simply since the inner kli is made of a different material, maybe it should be irrelevant. That's the discussion here. So this is one of Tosfos' big proofs against Rashi. So there's definitely a mitzvah here to try and explain how Rashi would respond to this. So I think maybe we could say like this. The truth is that the Gemara there in Zvachim, the Gemara's connection between having in mind a different carbon, for this ola when it's a chatis, for going from there to hilchas tumah by kalim is not a very straightforward thing. It's not simple to understand that. Obviously, the Gemara is saying that there is a common denominator between these two cases, but I believe we could suggest for Rashi that if we see this halacha the Torah teaches about tocho v'lo toch tocho, the first thing that comes to mind is not the issue of lav min ala machriv. In other words, if the basic principle is that when you have it's inside of a kli, which is inside of a kli, that's the teaching here, that's the discussion, and so there's no obvious issue that jumps out at us that, well, 1 second, what if it's made of a different material? That's not the primary teaching here. Now, it could be that once the Torah says without qualification that there is an idea of toch tocho, it could be that incidentally we could learn from that this idea of, well, even if it's a different type, we see that that has an effect. But I think we could say for Rashi that point of the discussion is really incidental to the main idea, which is there's something called tocho and there's something called toch tocho. And so Rashi feels that when the Gemara says even a kli shetef, Rashi does not understanding that, the drasha itself, the Torah itself, is going out of its way to make this point about lav mina lo machrba. Rashi feels that that's not really, part of the action, if you will. That's not what this teaching is about. Rather, Rashi feels that there is a very basic question of what's happening here, potentially, which is, hey, if the inner kli becomes tameh, then this whole halacha, goes away. It's impossible to say, in that case, that the food inside of that is not tameh. Of course, it becomes tameh because a tameh vessel can't block tumah. So it's just a matter of that. Rashi feels that this is a problem, a question that gets to the heart of the discussion here, and therefore Rashi felt this is a better reading of the Gemara. So again, Tosfos obviously understands that no, the concept that the Torah is coming to say here is the concept of when you have a different material that's in there, even that, the idea that even that can block the tumah, that's really a central point that the Torah is coming to discuss. So maybe that's how we can understand the back and forth between Rashi and Tosfos. And thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.